Welcome to this video tutorial brought to you by Tutvid.com. We are going to go ahead and take a look at creating some interface elements from Apple's iOS 7, the brand new iOS 7 that was just announced here in June of 2013. So we're not even sure if it's going to look exactly like we're about to create it, but certainly a lot of these design elements and the general style are going to be the same. But this is how it looks right now, with the exception of we're leaving off some icons and things that would normally actually be on these rounded rectangles. But really, the design is so much flatter and so much more simple that to add a shape, it's just, hey, grab a white shape. You could add a little plus or minus or little guy running or anything you wanted onto any of these icons, and it's really a breeze. So we're not even going to go over that in this tutorial. We're just going to talk about creating this new screen and the different elements you see here on the screen. So the first thing that we need to do is begin by actually getting this iPhone. We're not going to create the whole iPhone. We're just doing the screen. So if you came here for that, I'm sorry. Maybe that'll be a future tutorial. But for now, you can go over to pixieden.com and for free download an iPhone 5 PSD, all adjustable layers, completely free. Boom, download. Once you download that, open it up in Photoshop, and you will have, well, I need to open mine, so let me find it. And hey, what do you know? Here it is. So now once you've got this into Photoshop, we're going to make a couple changes really quickly. I know that I want to work with the white iPhone, so I can just get rid of the black one altogether. So whichever one you want to work with, you can pick your choice. It's no big deal either way. It doesn't make a difference. I'm going to just select the black phone layer group and hit the delete key to get rid of that. I'm going to open up the white phone group, and I'm going to get rid of this big shadow down here. I don't really want that, so I'll just go ahead and delete that. And I'm also going to grab my phone. I'm using the move tool. I just have selected the entire white phone layer group, and I'm going to move it to about the middle of my screen, like so we can really see what we've got going on here and have just center everything up nice and neat. Then I'm going to open up the background layer group, and I'm going to double click on the thumbnail, and I'm going to choose a different color for the background. Maybe I'll actually go with more of an orange color. Why not? It's kind of hurting my eyes. Maybe it'll hurt yours, but at least you know we're going through this pain together. So go ahead and hit OK. You can choose whatever color you like, though. Now that we've done that, we're going to go into the white phone layer group, and we're going to choose the Your Screen Here layer. So this is really, we're going to be replacing this layer. However, I don't just want to delete it. We can still use this layer to mask our new contents, our screen contents. We can mask them to this layer because, well, it's the size of the screen on the iPhone. So that's valuable. So I'm going to zoom in here, and the first thing that I'm noticing is this stroke. It needs to be a different color. It's not actually white on the iPhone. At least I don't think so. I think it's going to look a little bit more natural if it's a little bit darker than that. So I can check out here and see that I, in fact, do have a stroke associated with this layer. So I can double click on the stroke to bring up my layer style options. And I want to change the size from 8 pixels wide to about 6. And I'm going to change the color to black. So I'm just going to go all zeros, hit OK. And once it's black, I don't want solid black. I'm going to reduce the opacity to, I don't know, something like 75. It's going to be a very dark gray. I got 72. That looks about right. Go ahead and hit OK. Now, to add a background, we want to drag an image into this document, and then we're going to mask it to our screen. Actually, before we go any further, we don't want to see any of this flat phone mockup free resource, any of these icons. We don't even want to come close to seeing any of that. So in order to get rid of that but still save our stroke, we're just going to reduce the fill opacity of this layer to 0. All right, see that? We've gotten rid of the contents, but we've maintained the stroke. Perfect. In fact, we can probably go ahead and save our iPhone document before we lose anything. So a simple Command or Control S should save that up, or you can save it in a different spot on your hard drive, whatever you like. So now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and bring in our background. So I'm going to jump over to the bridge. You can see here's the file we're working on. Here are a couple other ones that I had messed around with. And I've got this skies.jpg file. It's a pretty big image. I'm going to drag it and actually drop it into this Photoshop document. So I'm actually dropping it here on the document, and you're going to see it's going to open it up. That's great. I'm actually going to scale it up a little bit by grabbing one of the corner points and holding my Shift and Alt key. That would be Shift and Option on the Mac. And just like that, we've got a nice image. Now, I really like the blue colors in the sky. I don't necessarily want to see the greens, although it wouldn't be bad to see the greens, but I'm going to be a little picky here, so I'm just going to stretch this out. So about, you know, I'm going to pretty much only have blues on the screen. You can see I've got some greens down here in the corner. I just reduced the opacity of that skies layer, by the way. So I'm going to just zoom that back in. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And don't worry about mashing your image. all I want from this image is the color and a little bit of the texture, but we're going to be blurring this so severely you're not going to see any of these details. All right, that's good enough. Just like that, I'm going to go ahead and commit the change. Now, the reason that I wanted to drag this image in is because it's going to drag in a smart object, and I'd rather apply a filter to a smart object because that filter is still going to be editable and non-destructive. Now, I'm probably not going to be too concerned with that in this case, but it's just a good habit to get into. So I've got my skies layer selected. I'm going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I really want to blur the living daylights out of this, so something like 50 pixels maybe. Looks pretty good actually, and you can see here as we get toward the top, you can really see how it's becoming semi-transparent. We don't like that, so we're going to adjust that in a second. However, this blur looks pretty good. Let's knock it down to about 40 pixels, see what that looks like. I actually think I like that even more, so we're going to stick with 40 pixels. Now, the key with the Gaussian blur, before I go any further, is you really want to blur your image so you can't make out the details, but you don't want to blur it so much that you completely muddle all of the colors. See how this almost just looks like solid blue, or just a very dark blue here fading to a lighter blue there. That's too uniform. There's too much blur. Whereas right around 45 pixels and 29, you can definitely pretty much tell it's a picture of a sky. Whereas about 45 pixels, you can just tell it probably has been a photograph that's been blurred, but unless you're thinking about it, you're certainly not going to identify this right off the bat as a sky. Maybe sky-like, but you're not immediately going to jump to that conclusion. So go ahead and hit OK, and I want to resize this, so I want to pull this image upward until I cover up that stroke. So Command or Control T, it's going to say, hey, the smart filters are going to be shut off, no problem, and I'm just going to pull this straight up, just like that, commit the change, and there we go. Perfect. So we're getting great coverage. Now we need to mask this image to our screen. So we're going to Command or Control click the Your Screen Here layer, but we're going to Control click or Command click the thumbnail to load that as a selection. We've got the skies layer. We can just go ahead and click the mask icon to create a mask, and it's going to use our selection. So there we go. We've just cut our background right there into our screen perfectly. One of the other really cool things about the new flat design for the iOS, and again, we're not going to get into how it could potentially be copying Android. It is very Android-esque, and I'm certainly no Apple apologist, but, whatever. It's still kind of cool looking. But one of the things that's cool, there are some issues with it, but anyway, not to get into that here. One of the things that's cool about the new iOS interface is kind of the depth that they do achieve using transparency and blurring stuff, and just you add this sense of depth to something that is still very flat and clean looking by adding additional elements and sort of showing them as glassy, see-through, semi-transparent, sometimes blurred so as to fake them being out of focus kind of effects. So we're going to do something similar to that here by creating a new layer, and we're going to name it Depth. And again, this is a very subtle effect, but still important. And it's mainly that concept of, okay, I know that if I put something in that's semi-transparent and blur it a little bit or blur parts of it, I can fake this idea of something being either deeper inside the iPhone or closer to the surface of the screen's glass. So go ahead and grab your brush, and we're going to grab maybe a 200 pixel brush. Let's roll with something about 200 pixels. All right, I got 195, and we're going to set the hardness to 100%. Once we've done this, you can see that looks pretty good. Maybe we can go a little bit bigger even, somewhere around 200, I guess. I'm at 240. Hardness at 100%. Then go Window Brushes to open up the brush panel, and we want to select Shape Dynamics. So we're actually going to click on the word Shape Dynamics. It's going to check it on, and we want to increase the size jitter to 100%. Control can be either pen pressure or off. However, in both cases, you want to use your mouse and not your stylus to do this, because you want Photoshop to, quote-unquote, randomly select what size brush is going to be next. So by using the brush, you're going to be able to do that. We're going to make sure that our opacity is set to 100% here on our brush tool, and we're going to click just a series of sort of dots. So there's one. Oh, whoops, I'm sorry. We don't want to have the opacity set to 100. We want to set the opacity down fairly low, something like 30%. I forgot for a moment what we're doing. So I'm going to click once, and I'm going to click again. It's a very small dot. And you can see, because we're using an opacity of 30%, if I were to cause any of my dots to overlap, and I'll have an opportunity here, all right? So I'll cause these two dots to overlap. You can see that they interact with each other. So we've got 30% opacity here, 30% opacity here, and where they overlap, well, it's going to be about 60% opacity. So just go ahead and place, we don't want two patterns quite that close. All right, great, and maybe something like that, and then a dot, and a dot up there. Something Something like that. That should be plenty. Maybe I'll throw one more down there. All right, we don't want to go too crazy. Certainly something that's not going to cover up all of the screen. I can get rid of my brushes panel here. And what we want to do now with our depth layer is we're going to go ahead and blur this layer and also drop, well, we're either going to drop the opacity or maybe we'll drop the opacity and set a blend mode. So let's begin just by blurring this. So go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and you're going to see they're going to disappear because Photoshop's saying, well, you just had 45% pixel or 45 pixels as your previous Gaussian blur. That's way too much. Let's try something like 3 or maybe even 4. We don't want to go too much higher. We're just trying to make these look like they're slightly out of focus. So go ahead and hit OK. I'm going to roll with 4 pixels, and I'm going to set the blend mode to soft light. All right, that looks pretty good, and I can even reduce the opacity a little bit if needed, down around 70 or 80%. I'm going to stick with something like 80% in this case. This all depends on your background image, and if you do this tutorial 100 times, you're probably going to have 100 different ways that you create this sort of depth pattern, whether or not you use soft light or reduce the opacity, how much you blur it, etc., etc., etc. So the next step is to build the dock, and we're going to do this fairly simply. We're going to create a new layer here. We're going to name it dock. Fairly simple so far. Grab the rectangular marquee tool, and from the style drop-down menu, choose fixed size. Now, I've got the sizes already punched in, a width of 1000 pixels and a height of 200, and we're going to drop that selection anywhere on the document. Now, here's an important thing. In order to be able to move this selection around without really messing it up, just make sure that you have this create a new selection option chosen up here in the tool options bar, not any of these other 3. All right, so we're going to zoom in here. And I'm going to take a look. I want this selection to be resting right on top of this bottom-most stroke. So you can see it's not. So I'm going to use my down arrow key or downward arrow key. Just nudge that whole selection down. And there we go. We're perfectly aligned. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and fill this with whatever my foreground color is. All right. So just like that. And that's just Alt Backspace Option Delete on the Mac. Command or Control D to deselect. The color of this bar does not matter at all. We're going to go apply a gradient to it in a second. We just need some pixels here. So before we apply the gradient, let's mask this dock to our screen, right? Pretty easy. We can control click your screen here. We've got our dock layer selected. We can go layer, layer mask, reveal selection. There we go. We've masked our dock in. Now that we've done that, we're going to add our gradient. Layer, layer style, gradient overlay. Now there's a whole bunch of different ways you can do this. You can go ahead and just create a solid color dock. You can, go crazy and do a super, wild blue. What I'm going to do and what I would recommend is that you simply sample a couple colors from your current background image. So I'm going to start here at the darker area, double click the black stop, which is the bottom of my dock, and I'm going to sample one of these darker tealish blue colors, hit OK, and I'm going to double click the white stop, and I'm going to sample one of these lighter tealish blue colors like so, hit OK and OK and OK once again, and we have our dock, and it is nice and colored, and it sort of matches our background because, hey, we went ahead and sampled colors from the background image. And now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and start adding the content to the very top of the screen, that being the cell strength indicator, the Wi-Fi icon. You could add like a Bluetooth icon. We're just going to add the time, the battery, and the battery percentage indicator. So zoom into the top here, create another new layer, and we're going to name this layer cell, because this is the cell strength you have, so to speak. Grab the brush tool, and we're going to go with a default brush. The reason I'm going to do this actually, I'm going to choose an actual brush from my panel, is because remember I still have those shape dynamics applied. And instead of coming in here, which I mean at this point we could just go ahead and reduce them to 0, but I just want to show you how this is done. If you select one of these brushes here, it's going to automatically clear that stuff anyway. So if I hadn't sat here and explained it to you, it would have been much faster. I know I've got the brush. I say, all right, I want to clear that. Boom, come in here, select the 9-pixel brush, and I'm good to go. I'm going to be able to create as many dots, and they're not at any kind of crazy different sizes or anything wild like that. So I'm going with the 9-pixel hard-edged brush for my little cell dots, and I'm going to set the opacity to 100%, and I'm going to place the first dot right there in the top corner. And at this point, you can either just quickly use the brush and go dot, 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 dot for 4 more dots, or what I'm going to do to make this a little bit straighter is I'm going to hit Command or Control J to duplicate this first dot, use my Move tool, and hold down my Shift key and nudge it to the left. I'm holding my Shift key down. I just nudged it, to the right, 1, and then I'm letting go of the Shift key, and I'm going to nudge 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that looks like it's a good spacing. Command or Control J, Shift, right arrow key, 1, 2, 3, 4. Command or Control J, Shift, right arrow key, 1, 2, 3, 4. Command or Control J, Shift, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so there we've created our cell strength indicator. They actually maybe should be a little bit closer than that, but you can see I've got 5 layers here. I'm going to select my top layer and just hit Command or Control E until I have merged them all together. So you can see, there we go. And now that I've done that, I'm going to drag them to the very top left corner of the screen, hold down my Shift key. I have my Move tool selected, by the way. Hold down my Shift key, hit the down arrow key once and the right arrow key once. So we've just moved them down and to the right 10 pixels. So they're perfectly aligned up there in the corner. That is our cell strength indicator. Now that we've done that, create another new layer and name this layer Wi-Fi. And we're going to create a custom shape. And with a little bit of messing around with the custom shape, we'll create our Wi-Fi icon. So go and grab your custom shape tool and click the drop down menu so you can see all the different shapes you have if you don't have all of these. Select this little cog wheel and go down to all. What I want is this bullseye right over here. That's what I want. It comes with Photoshop. And then I'm going to drag out a bullseye. Hold down your Shift key and you can drag out a nice sized bullseye. Don't worry about the color. We're going to adjust that in a moment. What I want to do, oh, whoops. We're not going to adjust that in a moment. I forgot one step. When you select the custom shape tool, you want to make sure that you're drawing with pixels. And when we're doing that, I believe it's just going to use the foreground color. So, yep, there you go. You'll be fine if your foreground color is white because that is, in fact, what we want. We do want to draw with pixels, though, not draw a new shape or shape layer. So now that we've done that, grab your rectangular marquee tool, set the style back to normal, and use the rectangular marquee tool to cut this bullseye in half. Hit the delete icon, or the delete key on your keyboard, excuse me, to get rid of half of that. Command or Control D to deselect. And then chop this remaining bullseye in half as well. Delete to get rid of the bottom. Command or Control D to deselect. Command or Control T to bring up free transform and rotate this guy. Holding on the shift icon, you can see we've rotated it 45 degrees. You can do that manually up here in the tool options bar if you so wish. Hit the check icon to commit the changes, and we have our little Wi-Fi icon. So just like that, we've created it. Maybe it needs to be a little smaller. Command or Control T, and we can just downsize it just a touch. And use the Move tool and your arrow keys to shift it right into place. So if I zoom out to 100%, what we've got so far looks pretty good. I want the Wi-Fi icon to be nudged upward just a little bit. There we go. All right, let's go create the battery icon up here in the top right. Create another new layer. Name this layer Battery. Pretty self-explanatory. Grab the rectangular marquee tool and draw out a selection like so. Hold down your Shift key and add just a little conductor to the tip of the battery so it looks like a real battery, and fill that with white. Alt backspace, Option delete on the Mac. Command or Control D to deselect. Okay, perfect. Now that we've done that, we could erase, but I'm going to use a mask here just for the sake of being properly non-destructive. And before I do that, I'm going to move my battery all the way to the top right, and again, shift and nudge down, and then shift and nudge to the left once, just so we get that 10 pixel gutter to the top and to the right of this icon, so it's perfectly nudged right up there into the corner. We're going to create a mask, so I'm going to go down to the bottom of my layers panel, create a new mask icon, grab either my brush tool or maybe the pencil tool is what I'll use. Make sure that you're drawing with black. Click once, hold down the Shift key, click another time, reach across the battery icon, I'm still holding my Shift key. And just like that, we've traveled all the way around the battery. Now, you can see we have a little bit of an issue here. That being, we definitely have more pixels on top of this line than we have below that line. Well, here's the beauty of using a mask, all right? I can say, well, I don't want to paint with black. I'm going to paint with white to bring the battery back. So what I'm doing is I click once, and then I hold down my Shift key and click where I want the line to go to, and Photoshop draws a straight line between those 2 points. Now I'm going to go back to black because what I need to do is take a line from here, Shift, and click all the way over there, and there we go. We have a perfect little battery icon for our iPhone. Now that we've done that, we're ready to start adding some type. Now, I'm going to use a free font called Railway, and you can download this, I believe, through fontsquirrel.com. You should be able to find it. I'm using the True Type Railway, so I'm going to grab my text tool, open up my characters panel, and you can see that it's already set to Railway TT, and I want to change the size to maybe about 14 points, and I'm going to set it to regular. We're going to set 100% for our battery power, so 100%. Great, that looks good. We need to make the color of the text white, however, so we can choose color, set it to white, okay, perfect, that looks great. We can leave our little battery indicator there. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key, I'm using my Move tool, and I can just duplicate this text right over and place it in the middle of my screen, just like so. Now we could align this by Command or Control clicking the Your Screen Here layer, and with the Move tool selected, look to the tool options bar. There you go, align to the center. And there we go. We've aligned it perfectly to the center. The only reason I say you might want to go ahead and align it is because considering the fact that we have this artwork here to the left and then this stuff to the right, it's going to be, Photoshop or your eye actually is going to mess with you a little bit if you try to just align this by hand. So now that I've done that, I'm going to double click on the new 100%. I'm going to stretch it out a little bit, and I'm going to type in, what time is it now? It is 6:08 p.m. PM is going to be in all caps. And I can just hit the check icon up here to commit that change. Now, the one thing that I don't like about this is, well, I'm going to make it bold, first of all, instead of regular. So I'm going to go bold. There we go, and we've got our time. I might want to make the PM just a little bit smaller. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to highlight PM, and let's make PM 12 points instead. Commit that change, and there we go. So we've got a nice little time marker here for our iPhone. If we zoom out, I'm going to move my character panel back here to the dock, and check it out. So far, so good. We're looking pretty good. What we're going to do now is we're going to place our icons and then just a little bit more text, and we'll have this thing wrapped up. So let's zoom in here on the dock, and we're going to grab the rounded rectangle tool. It is now underneath our custom shape tool, rounded rectangle tool, and we do want to create a new shape layer. All right, so I'm going to choose shape. The fill color I'm going to set to white. So there's white. Great. We don't need a stroke. Don't worry about any of that other stuff. And I'm just going to click once. Now, the options that I want to set, a width of 135 pixels, a height of 135 pixels, and a corner radius of 35 pixels. Hit OK. Now, this, in this case, works well with the size of our iPhone 5 template document here. All right, now that I've done this, I know that I need a 20 pixel gutter between the edge of this icon and the edge of my screen, and that's going to give me the perfect amount of space to have a 20 pixel gutter between each of my icons, and then another 20 pixel gutter over here between my last icon and the edge of the screen, which is effectively going to perfectly center our icons in the iPhone screen and also make sure that they're perfectly spaced. So I'm going to grab my move tool right there. The hotkey is the letter V, and I'm going to bring my icon and drag it right up here so it's perfectly aligned with the very top of my dock and the left side of the dock. So I'm holding down my shift key. I know that if I hold my shift key down and use my arrow keys, every time I nudge in any direction, it's going to nudge it 10 pixels. So I'm going to nudge this to the right 10 pixels, 20 pixels. And I'm going to nudge it down off the top of the dock 10 pixels and 20 pixels as well. Now that I've done that, I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key, and I'm going to drag a new icon out. But you can see here, it's definitely not aligned perfectly horizontally with this one. So I'm going to hold my Shift key as well as the Alt or Option key, and that constrains. So I'm pulling it not only out to the side, but I'm perfectly constraining it to be in line with my other icon. So I'm going to use my arrow keys to nudge it over until both icons are touching, and then Shift 10, 20 pixels. Great. I'm going to do the same thing, Alt and Shift, to drag out a new icon. Make sure that they're touching, and then 10, 20 pixels. That's just shifting the arrow keys. And again, I'm going to do it all over. 1, 2, and that's 10, 20 pixels. And then over here, we also have a 20 pixel gutter. So you can see, if I zoom out, we have 4 icons that are all perfectly spaced. And I've got more space on the bottom of the dock than at the top. And I want that because we're going to punch in the word phone and mail and Safari and music in just a moment. So now that we have our 4 icons, it's time to start adding some color. In this case, it's time to start adding those kind of crazy, I don't want to say pastel color, but very brightly colored gradients that are all of the buzz about the new iOS 7, the ugly buzz, if you will. I'm not a fan of them, but to stay true to what iOS 7 is, we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. So we're going to select the first rounded rectangle and go Layer, Layer Style, Gradient Overlay. And I'm going to select my gradient editor, and here in the black, I've got the numbers written down here, so I'll read them off to you. The darker green is 0CD419, and the lighter green is 8CFE73. And I'm going to hit OK. Whoops, I messed something up. 8CFE, there we go, 73. And that's the lighter green. Hit OK, and hit OK, and hit OK. And there we go. We've got our first green icon. Now onto the blue icon, which looks particularly bad, if you ask me. We're going to go Layer, New Layer Style, Gradient Overlay. And again, open up that gradient editor. Now here, the light blue goes on the bottom, but don't worry. Select that black stop, and the color is 92E2F9. So that's the light blue, and then the darker blue up here at the top is, let's see, it's 7798F4. And hit OK, OK, and OK. So we've got our first 2 icons colorized. Now the Safari icon, it's not quite white, but it's basically white but we're going to go ahead and just be very picky about it. And this color stop remains white, and this one over here just goes to an extremely light gray. I mean, the color I've got written down here is FFF DFE, so it's very, very, very bright. For the sake of being able to see some kind of difference, we're just going to knock it down to like 95% brightness. So F2, F0, F1, hit OK, and hit OK, and hit OK. And now for the music icon, it's kind of that very pinkish, hot pink / red. Again, layer style, gradient overlay. Open up your gradient editor, and here are the colors for you. FF5, C39, and then the top is FF2, 967. Hit OK, hit OK, and hit OK. All right, now if I zoom back out, you can see we have our 4 little icons. They actually look kind of cool, just in the context of what we've got going on here. Not too terribly bad. However, we're going to zoom in. We're going to add a little bit of type beneath these. Then we just have a little bit more type, and we'll be done. So grab the text tool and make sure that you're creating white text. I just selected my little color swatch up there. And we're going to drag out a small text field beneath the phone icon and type the word phone. Now that I've done that, I want this to either be Arial or Helvetica. I'm on a PC, so I'll use Arial. I do have a Helvetica font. If you're on the Mac, feel free to go with Helvetica. Just some kind of very simple sans serif style font. We do want the typeface here to be moderately sized. Let's try something like 18 points. That's pretty good. I don't know that I want this to be bold, so I'll probably set it to regular. Yeah, I like that. And that's pretty good. I'm either going to set this to soft light. That might be a little bit too, yeah, that's too subtle. I'll just reduce the opacity to 65%. Yep, that looks good. All right, now that I've done that, I'm just going to drag that down off of the icon a little bit. I'm going to Alt and hold down my Alt and Shift keys, drag over one title, drag over another title, and then the last title. All right, so I can double-click the T over here and type the word music, double-click this T and type the word Safari, and then this T here and type the word mail. So there we go, phone, mail, Safari, music. So we know what those icons are for. We just need to actually drag some sort of white art icon over the actual icon. But that's pretty easy to do, so we're not going to run over that. Next, we're going to add the little pages indicator, which sits down here in the middle. This is going to be pretty easy. We're going to create a new layer and call it pages. You could actually call it something like pagination, because it's just showing how many pages of icons there are, right? So we're going to grab the brush tool, and again, remember, our little cell circles are 9 pixels, so 9 pixel hard edge brush is what I'm going to use here. However, what I'm going to do with this is I want it to be centered, so I'm going to come straight up out from between these 2 icons, and I'm going to set the opacity of my brush tool to 50%, and I'll show you why I'm doing this in just a second. So I'm just going to place one dot. Bam, right there. I don't really care if it's perfect. Again, it's just for the sake of doing this little demo. And I'm going to duplicate this layer, Command or Control J, and I'm going to grab my Move tool. Again, holding down my Shift key, I'm going to nudge this 20 pixels to the right, and I'm going to duplicate this layer, Command or Control J, and I'm going to nudge it 20 pixels back to the left, so 10, 20, and it's right in the same place as the original dot, so I need to go 20 pixels even further to the left, so 10, 20 pixels. Now, remember, this page's layer down here on the bottom, this is our center dot, whereas this guy on top is our left dot. The only reason I'm mentioning this is because I want one of these dots to be brighter. This is why I chose to paint at 50% opacity, because by simply duplicating this last pages icon, Command or Control J, we make that one icon brighter than the other two, thereby indicating, hey, we're on this page of icons. So I can now grab all 4 of these layers, or just start hitting Command or Control E to merge them all together, just like that. So now our pagination looks just swell. So there we go. The last thing to do is add the big date and timestamp to the very middle of the screen. So go ahead and grab your type tool once again and drag out a nice big area for type. And by the way, my type is all centered horizontally. Well, it's just centered in general for this particular tutorial. So what I'm going to do is, again, what do we have? 6:08 is when we went ahead and added our time there at the top. I'm going to grab my character panel, which, by the way, if I didn't mention it earlier, is window character. We're going to set the size of this type to 165 points. Now, this doesn't look right because we're still on the Arial typeface. We want a super thin typeface. So I'm going to go with a font called Railway which we used earlier, right? So now that we have that, that's great. But from the drop-down menu, I want to choose extra light. So we want this to be very, very thin, kind of like it is with the Apple iOS 7 interface. So there's our time. I'm going to Command or Control click my screen layer, or the Your Screen Here layer, so I can center this time horizontally. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my Move tool right up there in the Tool Options bar. Go ahead and center that guy up. Command or Control D to deselect. So we can zoom in on this. Well, actually, I'm going to zoom out. I'm not thinking here. I want to duplicate this layer. Command or Control J. And I'm going to drag it straight down using my Move tool. Holding my Shift key, just drag it straight down. And now I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to punch in the date. So Thursday, comma, June 13th. And then hold down my Command or Control key and hit the Enter key, to sort of commit those changes. All right, so now that I've done that, I'm going to reduce the size of this type to 36 points. So it's very small. It tucks right in beneath the time, just like so. I can nudge it up if I need to. Now what I need to do is select both of these layers and just reduce them both to about 65% opacity. There we go for that. And then for the date beneath it, something like 65% opacity. And voila, we have created a few of the elements that you would see in the new iOS 7 iPhone interface, operating system, whatever you want to call it, however you want to slice it. But you can see we've created the icons, the dock, the background, fake the depth, use the type, and the different icons on the top, and all of that stuff. We've gone through it, and we've done a fairly nice job with it. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you for sticking around and watching it. Make sure you go check out the website. That's www.tutvid.com, and follow me on Twitter @Tutvid. I'll catch you guys later. Have a good one.